What's up guys, Mike Thomas, aka the Young Trishula here. Today I wanted to talk about some new cards that were just announced and revealed last night. This is the new archetype Mr. Rune, or at least that is the name that it is currently given until we get an official translation of the cards. So I haven't actually looked at the cards, so I will be seeing these for the first time, just like the rest of you, I'm sure. But before we dive in, I want you to pause the video and go leave me a comment and let me know what you think or what you would hope that this new archetype, these new cards do, kind of what you would like to see out of a newly revealed archetype. Now you've typed out your comment, you've clicky buttoned on that submit comment. Let's dive into it. All right, so right off the bat, there's a picture of Todd Howard. Okay, so I don't know what we're getting into, but Todd Howard is just here to stare into our souls. All right, let's take a look at this. All right, so the first card here is called Rune no Izumi, Spring of the Mr. Rune. It is a field spell, so all right, they're giving the deck a field spell. That's either a horrible sign or a great sign, depending on how you feel about these things. So field spell, you can activate Mr. Rune quick play spell cards from your hand during your opponent's turn. Okay, so that's interesting. So right off the bat, the field spell is kind of like Magical Musketeers with its gimmick. That's kind of interesting. Once per turn, if you activate a Mr. Rune quick play spell, you can target up to 3 Mr. Rune quick play spells in your graveyard, place them on the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw that many cards. I'm sorry, what? Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm assuming that because both of these effects are talking about quick play spells, that this is going to be a very quick play spell centered archetype. And the fact that right out of the gate, we're seeing that we can return our cards to the graveyard and then draw up to 3 cards back to our deck. And keep in mind that it doesn't say that they have to have different names either. It just says up to 3 Mr. Rune quick play spells. So not only is this deck going to have the ability to recharge by drawing 3, but it also has a way to recycle its spell cards. So that seems really powerful. So I think the first effect is more or less irrelevant at this point because the second effect is so strong. So this is off to a good start. Let's see, the second card, Deceit of the Mr. Rune. You can only control 1 Deceit of the Mr. Rune. Each time a quick play spell is activated, banish the top card of your opponent's deck. That's interesting. I don't think that's good, but maybe we'll see. Maybe there's some synergy with this. But right off the bat, this just seems very meh, because how many times are you activating a quick play spell? Let's think about this. Like, if your game is crazy, maybe 10 times, but that's just a Pot of Desires. That's nothing too crazy, and it banishes face up. So if they're playing something like Thunder Dragon, all those cards are going to trigger. So I think that this is leaning. This card was leaning towards busted. This card's leaning towards but who knows? Well, maybe with the rest of the archetype, this card's gonna be crazy. We'll come back at the end and we will see if my prediction is correct. So next we have our first quick play spell that we've seen so far called Point of the Mr. Rune. Kind of interesting here. So I see what they're going for with the Todd Howard thing is you're playing your first person adventurer game, your Skyrim. You know, we have our healing spell in one hand and our sword in our on hand, and we have a path in front of us. I see Whiterun off in the distance. Okay, I see the Todd Howard thing. So quick play spell, you can only activate 1 card with this card's name per turn. Activate one of these effects, skip your next battle phase after this card resolves. Add a Mr. Rune card from your deck to the hand, except this card, then banish the top card of your opponent's deck. Okay, not bad. It's literally just an engage, but it also just banishes the top card of your opponent's deck. That's cool. Or special summon a Mr. Rune monster from your extra deck to the extra monster zone. Okay, not a bad card at all. Very good card. Definitely 3 of in the deck. Next card, Mr. Rune of the Brilliant Flame. Oh, that's interesting. Hold on, is that a gun? Welcome to card art that will probably be censored in the TCG. POV, you're playing Call of Duty. You walk into the final boss room of Demon Souls, and instead of, fighting him, you've used the coin dupe glitch, and you just one-shot him with your literal rifle. Got it. I understand what's going on. You can only activate 1 card with this card's name per turn. Activate one of these effects, skip your next battle phase. Okay, so since both of these quick play spells had that exact same condition on it, I'm going to assume that it's going to be like that for all of them, so I'm not going to mention it unless it doesn't follow that rule. Target opponent special summon monster monster, destroy it, then banish the top 2 cards of their deck, or special summon a Mr. Rune monster from your extra deck. Okay, not bad. Something interesting to note here is that this card is generic. This card does not say, like, if you control a Mr. Rune card, then you can. So you could put this in anything. This just seems like good spot removal to me. It comes at a little bit of a high cost because you have to skip your battle phase, but it is just a quick play spell that says destroy a special summon monster and then banish 2 cards from your opponent's deck. So definitely a good card. This might see play outside of the Mr. Rune deck, and definitely interesting in the Mr. Rune deck. So I'm getting kind of excited to see what these Mr. Rune monsters from the extra deck are. We have now the 3rd quick play spell. We have Mr. Rune of Destruction. Target a spell trap your opponent controls, destroy it, then banish the top 4 cards of their deck. Holy shit. This deck actually just says you don't get to play Eldritch. Like, imagine this against Eldritch. Pop one of their spell traps, like when they go activate Conquistador, chain this, pop the Conquistador, banish 4 from their deck. That's pretty good. This one's also continuing the trend of being able to summon a Mr. Rune from the extra deck. So I think that's really cool, actually, that this deck has all of their quick play spells seem to have the effect that they can summon one of their monsters from the extra monster zone. And that to me is interesting because if you think about a deck like Sky Striker, right? Sky Striker is a deck that while it was capable of going first, while it's good at going first with like floodgates, DP, whatever, it was traditionally a deck that you always want to go second with because you needed your opponent to have cards to get advantage out of stuff like Afterburner, to get stuff out of Jamming Waves, Widow Anchor, Shark Cannon. Like, your opponent had to play for all of your good striker cards to be useful. All of these cards are useful on both players' turns because if you're going first, you can just special summon out the Mr. Rune card. It doesn't matter if you have MST in your hand. You can just use MST to do something completely different. It can just special summon a monster. I really like that all of these cards so far have this effect. So I'm not going to mention this unless I see one that doesn't have that effect, but I think that that's going to be the theme for this deck, and I think that's really cool. I really like that. And I like that these cards are generic as well. I think this card could actually end up seeing side deck play just specifically to counter decks like Eldritch. So let's see. Mr. Rune of Dispel. Another common theme I'm seeing is the quick play spells all feel like whichever one we see next seems like has the effect of the last card that we looked at. Mr. Rune of Dispel. If your opponent adds a card from the deck to the hand, except during the draw phase, discard a random card. Yo, that's kind of cool. Your opponent searches invocation and then you just roll a dice to rip it out of their hand. Like, this card is just a generic levy rip. What? I'm starting to understand why they all skip your next battle phase, because all of these cards are generic. Like, this stuff is good. This stuff is good. Like, obviously I don't think this is as good as something like Shared Ride, but that's still not a bad effect at all. Definitely not a bad effect. And the fact that it then again banishes 2 cards. So it looks like this is a mill deck. It looks like all these cards have the banish X number of cards from your opponent's deck kind of tacked on them somewhere. So it looks like the idea is that you're trying to mill your opponent's strategy, which is really interesting to me, but also potentially really degenerate because I could see this being played in a deck like Mystic Mine, where, you know, you're playing Mystic Mine and then you're playing all these good control spells to, you know, just run your opponent out of cards, like potentially milling their outs like Twin Twister, Cosmic Cyclone, whatever. I see some potential for degeneracy here, but I think that these cards are so far just generically really good. Mr. Rune of the Freezing Curse. Target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn, then banish top 3 cards of their deck. This card is imperm, but it mills 3. That's good. Like, this is just good. No complaints on this card. This card's just good. Mr. Rune of Slumber. Target a face-up monster on the field. Apply this effect to it, then banish top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Once applied this turn, that monster cannot attack. Also, the next time it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, it is not destroyed. So this is kind of like an Eagle Booster, like Eagle Booster plus Kaina, kind of. I don't know if this one's that good, but maybe there's some reason that you might want to keep your monsters on the field. Maybe the Mr. Rune monsters aren't that sticky, so maybe include, maybe not, but banishing. But this one is one of the higher banish effects, so could be useful. Mr. Rune of the Golden Droplets. So this one is only for people that can afford Ulti Forbidden Droplet. If you can't afford Ulti Forbidden Droplet, I guess you can't play this card. Your opponent draws a card, then you banish 4. That's bad. That's bad. Like, this card is a -2, right? Because you give up a card and you give your opponent a card. So you get no positive benefit from this card and your opponent gets a card. That to me sounds bad. But if we consider the fact that this deck seems to be a mill deck, right? This card alternatively reads mill your opponent by 5 cards. And the fact that you could play 3 of this effectively says mill your opponent by 15 cards. The other thing that we can keep in mind is that this card can win you the duel if your opponent runs out of cards in their deck. Say they're on their last turn and they're trying to beat you and you mill them out of cards. You could actually use this to win the game by flipping, like, say you have 5 card sets, 5 spells, right? And your opponent has like 10 cards in their deck. You mill them for 10, like you mill their whole deck, and then you just flip this on them. That could actually be really good. So I see potential for this card to maybe be included in the deck, depending on how dedicated to the mill strategy you want to be with this deck. This card's either a 3 of or a 0 of. So okay card, I would say. Maybe like a 3 out of 5 on that. I see that the next card is a monster, so this seems to be the last of the quick play spells. So let's take a look at this. Banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck equal to the number of cards they control. Okay, that's interesting. How would we make that good? Where I see this card being good is against one of 2 kinds of deck. I see this being really good against a deck like Eldritch, where they're obviously just going to set their whole hand. This might just read mill 4 cards from your opponent's deck, and if they don't appreciate their cards being banished, that could be really, it's a neg-1 that would further your strategy and maybe get rid of some of their resources. But where I think this card would actually be really strong is kind of against combo decks. Now, hear me out on this. From everything I've seen from this deck so far, I feel like this is a Mystic Mine deck, to be perfectly honest. I feel like this is a kind of deck where you want to Mystic Mine your opponent and accelerate the deck out process and not really give them a chance to draw into their out to that Mystic Mine. So for that reason, these cards actually might be the reason that Mystic Mine gets banned. The way I see that this card would be good is, say your opponent's playing a combo deck and they go through a lot of their resources. Say they end up with like 15 cards left in their deck, right? And like say they make a big board too, right? Like your opponent goes through their whole deck and then they make a big board. Assuming that this card resolves, like assuming that they don't have interruptions for this, so like maybe you Dark Ruler them, this card seems like it would be really good if you had 2 of it. Because if your opponent has, say, I don't know, maybe 7 cards, like maybe they have 4 monsters on the field, maybe a trap and a field spell, right? So like 6 cards. We'll call that 6 cards. This might be able to deck them out really quickly. Say you just banish 6 cards right away, you set another one, you banish another 6. That to me seems pretty good. So this card seems like one that you might consider playing simply because it would punish opponents that play combo if you find a way to resolve this. Though I feel like this card is also not very good simply because it doesn't do anything, right? Like all the other ones have like decent effects. Like there's an MST, there is a Fiendish Chain, there is a Trident effect. This one, you just go neg-1 and mill your opponent. So kind of interesting. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Not really sure how to feel about this one. Now we're into the monsters. So I'm really excited to see what these do because these cards could make or break the deck. These cards could make or break the deck. So we have Munin, Wings of the Mysteroon. This is a level 3 Light Fairy Fusion effect monster. And its materials are 2 Mysteroon monsters, which is interesting to me because that means that there is a potential that this deck will actually have other monsters other than extra deck pieces. So its materials are 2 Mysteroon monsters. That to me is interesting because it might mean that there are going to be, if this card is special summon from the extra deck, you can discard a card, add a Mysteroon continuous spell from your deck to your hand. Okay, so this card searches the continuous spell that every time you activate a quick play spell, they mill 1. Nice to see that you don't have to waste your engage effect on specifically searching that card if you wanted to go down that route. When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a Mysteroon card or cards and or set cards that you control, you can banish this card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy the card. Okay, interesting. Definitely not bad. Definitely leading me towards the notion that this is intended to be a back row style deck. Even though we do have that field spell that says that you can activate the Mysteroon quick plays from your hand, it does make sense to me that this would be a back row centric deck, and it's nice to see that this deck includes some generic negation for something like a Twin Twister or a Cosmic Cyclone. And then once per turn, during each end phase, gain 1,000 life points. That's not really that huge of an effect, but since this deck feels a little bit like it's leaning towards degeneracy, there might be some goofy stuff that you could do with like Hope for Escape, Life Force Equalizer, stuff like that. Okay, not bad, not bad. Moving on to the next one is the Gary, Fangs of the Mysteroon. Again, materials being 2 Mysteroon monsters. This one is a level 4 Dark Beast Fusion monster monster, which interestingly, since it doesn't seem like, I'm not seeing right away that it has a condition that it has to be summoned by an effect, this could actually end up being a instant fusion target for decks like Tri-Brigade that might want to play Farrajet. So something interesting to note there. If this card is special summoned from the extra deck, you can target one non-quick play Mr. Rune spell in your graveyard, add it back to your hand. Cannot be destroyed by card effects. When this card is destroyed by battle, target a card on the field, destroy it. Okay, not too bad. I do like that this card seemingly helps you generate some tempo, because one of the issues that I noticed with this deck as we were reading some of the cards is that this deck feels very minus, that not many of the cards seem to be trading with the opponent, so it feels like you will flip all of your cards and then they'll just attack you and you die. So it's nice to see that one of the monsters, you know, is a little bit of a wall that you can put it up, they can't pop it, they have to attack over it, and then when they attack over it, it can pop a card on the field, so you could flip a quick play in the battle phase, summon this guy, they have to attack into it, they have to lose a monster. Not too bad. I like that. And the fact that it can get back a Mr. Rune spell, either the field spell or the continuous spell, that seems to be kind of the heart and soul of the deck on paper. I'm not really sure how good the continuous spell is, but definitely, you know, a card that is intended to be played in the deck. It's nice that you have a way to get that card back so you don't have to play multiple of it. So good card. And then finally, just a Book of Eclipse reprint is confirmed for the deck builder pack in OCG. Not too important for us. Those are the new cards. So guys, let me know in the comments what you think of this new archetype. Was your prediction correct? Did you ever suspect that the next archetype that we would get would be mill deck, but it's Skyrim? Because that is definitely not what I expected. I didn't expect mill deck, but it's also Skyrim when I clicked on this link that people from my Discord sent me. So yeah, let me know. I think these cards are cool. I really like the idea of having a mill deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think this deck will be interesting, though I'm a little bit afraid because I see the potential for a lot of degeneracy with these. So, you know, 50-50. This deck will either lead to a lot of grief, or this deck will be really fun and interesting. So let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this deck will be a griefer deck, or do you think this deck will be a very fun, interesting deck? Let me know in the comments. That's all for me though. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.